All right, we are live again here. 5 minutes late.
Fashionably late.
So we're waiting for a couple people to join in. So, how's your day for contacting?
I was just gonna ask you the same thing. It was good. I had a lot of really they were pretty much initial calls, but I mean they were super high level. So it wasn't just it wasn't just the normal give me a price list, all that stuff. I mean sometimes I feel like I just go for the throat. Sometimes depending on the situation, I feel like I had a couple of those today. Totally different product categories though, like complete opposite ends of the spectrum where I'm like, I don't want to screw up and say the wrong company, the wrong product or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to cover, I know we've been doing sourcing and Smart Scout. We've been doing outreach strategies. I think it's a good idea if we cover some of the same stuff, but I also want to share a story because this one crossed my mind because we're coming up on about 3 years of doing Wholesale, about 3 years or so now. And you remember that account that we lost way back when we first started. We had the account, and well, this was a big one. We lost it.
So yeah.
We lost it because
I
mean, I was handling the account, but at the time I didn't know what I was doing. Right? We didn't know how to.
Yeah.
We didn't know how to pitch the value at that time, and I want to get into that, and what people can learn from it. Do you have Smart Scout, or you want me to pull it up here?
Can you pull it up?
Yeah, let me see.
I mean, there's really nothing that you can do. There's no substitute for experience. It just comes down to now being in the position. Like if you're in that position now, and either one of us is working on that account, I feel like it's a totally different. Your confidence level is so much greater just because you have that experience and you've been through the how many failed accounts to now to the point where you have the bigger opportunity, and it's your confidence level goes up so much.
Right. Exactly. That's what it's all about is the experience and putting the reps in, getting on the phone and actually communicating with these brands.
You can't get around that either.
No, you can't. You can take courses, you can do everything, but if you're not actually doing the outreach, you're not going to get the reps in, and you're not going to make any progress.
Yeah.
So I'm having trouble getting into Smart Scout here.
Okay.
See if you can get in, and why don't we just start with outreach strategies?
Yeah, I'll get everything set up, and then we'll just talk about some outreach. And
let's do some outreach, and there's only a couple people in here, so we'll let some people join in as we go on. So outreach strategies, I would say, just let's start beginner level, right? Let's start, you're just starting out, you're making calls, maybe to distributors, maybe to brands, and you don't have a clue where to start, right? So the first thing that we say is, and I always preface this by saying is you've got to be sourcing the right kinds of suppliers, right? If you're not contacting the types of suppliers that are in line with what kinds of goals you're going for, you're never going to close the right accounts. And for us, it's smaller to mid-sized brands. It's not the P&G companies. That being said, you can make money on those big brands with distributors, right? There is a margin in there where you can, actually make money if you're working with the right distributor. But again, we go back to this concept of, I want to build a business, right, that's sustainable long-term over the years. So that's how we've run our business and grown our businesses. We don't want to worry about, IP claims or anything like that. We just want pure sustainability and a direct stream of revenue, coming in like clockwork from each of our brand direct accounts. So I always say start by sourcing the right kinds of companies, identify who you're going to target, distributors or brands. And then once you've identified that, determine what your outreach strategy is going to be. So I guess, did you want to maybe speak to a little bit the differences between outreach if you're contacting, just a distributor and working with the brand versus actually contacting that brand directly?
Yeah, and distributors, I mean, and just to preface it as well, even the distributors that we do work with are very small. They're not massive distributors, and sometimes they're just brands that we started working with that stock other product lines as well. So that's kind of how we got that relationship. But yeah, the differences with distributors are a lot of the times they themselves don't have a vested interest in growing the brand because they're just looking to make money and profit off the sale of the brand's products. So in a lot of cases, you're going to be better off just throwing money at them, essentially, for lack of a better way of putting it, because that is what gets your foot in the door. Distributors, they have MOQs a lot of the times, minimum order quantities, and brands might not have that. Same thing with a brand. If you're dealing with them, it might be better to not take that approach. I mean, we've had brands that we haven't purchased from for quite literally a year, and we've worked with them for an entire year before we've even made a purchase because we've been going from the other angle. And if you're talking from outreach, highlighting things that are wrong essentially with a brand, you're not creating problems, you're just exposing the problems that already exist, and then you're just bringing that to the brand's attention. And a lot of times that doesn't work with a distributor because, again, they're not in the business of having that brand equity and owning that brand.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a good identification, standpoint and perspective, because when we contact brands, right, depending on the level of resistance that we're met with, it might be a good idea for a beginner to say, hey, to the brand, do you have a list of distributors, of authorized distributors that we would be able to work with, right? That way you can just start getting product into your portfolio.
Right.
And it's over time, as you get better at the outreach process, you'll be more accustomed at dealing with the rejection. So let's go off of that and let's say, right, we are not taking Amazon sellers. Like, how? There's a million and one ways to dissect that statement, and there's so many layers to it, but every supplier says it, right? It's like 90% of brands that you reach out to are going to say something along the lines of, we're not interested in working with e-commerce or Amazon, right? So as a beginner, it can be very challenging to overcome that resistance and, elevate yourself to actually getting past that rejection. So I guess, what's the first step to getting past that?
Well, I think the first step is rationalizing to yourself that not to take that at face value. I think if you take that at face value and you just accept it, then you're accepting the rejection. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not accepting Amazon sellers. That's just their default statement because they're so overwhelmed by all the issues that are going on and they don't know how to proceed. And so that's the default. It's just easier for them, given their past experience, to not deal with the problem at all than to deal with the problem because you can't blame them either. I mean, the majority of sellers don't want to help and don't have a vested interest in the brand. So, that's their standpoint. So I think the first step is just rationalizing and understanding to yourself that we don't take Amazon sellers means something else. It doesn't mean we don't take Amazon sellers. It means we have a problem and we need you to solve it, essentially.
Right. And it's a blanket statement because if they spent their time having to deal with all of the Amazon sellers reach out to them, they wouldn't be able to run their business, right? They'd have to hire a full-time employee to deal with all of, that everybody in their inbox, right? So It's like they need to do that to, deal with it. A lot of brands will just take the phone number off their website because of this reason, or they'll just delete their contact us tab or something, just so they don't get flooded because brands are getting flooded. So I think the mindset shift for you as the beginner, whoever is starting Amazon Wholesale, Brand Direct specifically, is empathizing with the fact that they're dealing with all of these problems and validating their position, right? So a couple of things you just said there, Brandon, we'll say, to the supplier, right? Completely understand as to why you make this policy, right? And then you kind of shift the conversation and say, hey, well, here's our differentiation factors.
Right. I had a conversation today, first call, like first initial call. I mean, we sent an email. It was, we don't accept Amazon sellers. And then I said, I got on the phone with the person that I needed to speak to. It's not the owner, but it's like the very small company. But I mean, they're still moving 2,000 units a month, probably more on Amazon. And, it was a head person at the company, whatever the position was. And first call today, scheduled a Google Meets. It was an hour long, and feeling it out, talked exclusivity a little bit right on the first shot. And she was like, yeah, we've had other people ask about this. She said, but none of them were as reputable as you are.
Yeah.
So, it's like differentiating. So, I mean, 20 other people could offer the same thing. 20 other Amazon sellers could reach out if it's and you don't have to do things like that. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but just differentiating yourself at all is what's going to get your foot in the door. And obviously, as you grow, you can learn to do higher level things. But yeah, I mean, the majority, it's pathetic in terms of the outreach that, you don't have to do much to differentiate yourself, because a lot of the sellers are looking to just capitalize off of the brand. And if you provide any sort of value, I think you're already a step ahead.
Yeah. If you pick up the phone, you're a step ahead. We got a question here from Joseph Edelman. How do you get around it when it's a low-level rep that says no Amazon sellers because that is our policy?
You find a way to get in touch with someone who's not a low-level rep. And you got to get creative sometimes. A lot of times people that are gatekeepers like that are just gatekeepers because that's the information that they're being fed. And so if you can somehow find a way to, and so in other words, no matter what information that you give that person, they're not going to care, because all they know is to say that one line to you, which is that they don't accept Amazon sellers. So you need to get through to someone, find a way creatively to get through to someone that will actually understand what you're talking about and care about the things you have to say. I think that's the first step. How to do that, I think it's case by case, and it's sometimes you got to get pretty, I don't know.
Well, I think you also need to identify how large the company is.
Yes.
Because if you're reaching out to a massive brand, there's not just going to be one gatekeeper, right? There's going to be 2 and 3, and you're never going to get to the decision maker. And that's why we always say, what kinds of brands are you sourcing? And that means you need to be contacting brands that have either an owner-operated company or accessibility to a decision maker, right? It doesn't always have to be the owner of the company that you get on the phone. It could be a VP, it could be a director of sales, just somebody with some sort of authority that has a say in the direction of their Amazon / e-commerce policy, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I assume that this was a brand direct account, but yeah, if it's a larger distributor, I mean, it might be a little bit tougher, and it might not be the best idea to try to get in touch with someone at the top if it's a huge company, because you're probably just wasting your time, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but you're going to be met with, even if it's not a massive, conglomerate company, like you might be reaching out to a brand that meets all of our criteria that we're saying here, and you're still dealing with low-level reps. So if that's the case, you call them and you immediately, don't try not to waste your time, right? As soon as you introduce yourself, the name of the company, and tell them what you're interested in doing, which is to either open a wholesale account or carry their line, or however you're phrasing it, you immediately want to say, am I speaking with the right person for that? And or can you put me in touch with the right person for that? A little nuance that I use in like, at this outreach process and slash, it's sort of a sales strategy is when you get the know nothing on the phone, right? Because that's what I call them. They don't know anything. Um, just say, um, can you put me in touch with the right person for that?
Yeah.
Because you're immediately telling them, look, like, you've made your statements, you know what you're after, and you immediately want to get something done. Whereas if you're not sure if they're a gatekeeper or not, maybe they do have a strategic position in the company, don't say, can you put me in touch with the right person? Because it sounds like you're sort of making them sound like, inferior, right? It makes them sound like there's a superior above them. So if you're not sure if it's a gatekeeper, right, it could be a strategic decision maker. I would say, am I speaking with the right person for that?
Right.
Right. So it's like just, nuance things in what you say. And another thing that crossed my mind when I was doing some outreach today was that, when I send in a follow-up email, right, we've been pursuing an account, we've been going through communication with the brand. I'll say, do you have 5 to 10 minutes for a brief phone call? And then right underneath it, I'll include a link to my calendar.
It's exactly what I do. Yep.
So one, you are identifying a time, right, by saying 5 to 10 minutes, as opposed to saying a brief call, because a brief call could be 30 minutes to an hour, right? But if you say 5 to 10 minutes, everybody's got 5 to 10 minutes, right?
And that's a strategy too. It's
Yeah.
like,
And then
because
below it, if you make it easy to click, boom, boom, done, and then it's scheduled rather than going back and forth by email, 5 times to coordinate a time.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the strategy behind that as well is getting them on the phone with I always say 10 minutes, but getting them on the phone with that 5 to 10 minute thing. Once they're on the phone, they're not going to look at their watch or their computer or the clock and be like, well, it's been 10 minutes. I'm going to go, and if they do that, then I don't know. I've never had it happen, but once they're there, they're going to be somewhat invested, at least. Even if they're going to reject you again, they're going to be somewhat invested because they've already made that commitment to get to that point. But if you say, hey, I want an hour of your time, that barrier to entry is really high, I think. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, if you say you want an hour of their time, I don't think they're going to respond. But yes, so in walking through sort of the sales sequence of what this looks like when you contact a brand, I think there's like a general outline to it, right? Or at least a strategy that works for us, and I think a lot of other brand direct wholesalers, that they seem to use sort of this same sequence, right? Which is one, introduce who you are and what you do. I think it's important to say your name, the name of your company, and give them a location of where you're located, because it provides legitimacy to your business. And then the second thing is, once you've done that, is tell them why you are calling, which is, we are interested in opening a wholesale account and or stocking your products. I always say stocking products because that shows commitment, right? A lot of brands will write you off because they think that e-commerce is drop shipping, but we're not drop shipping. We are paying for the inventory in advance, and we're carrying, multiple SKUs. So that's immediately showing them commitment. And then from there, once you've told them that you're an e-commerce company, you'll say, do you mind if I ask, how you're handling the e-commerce Amazon space? And
yeah,
that's generally the outline in an intro call. If you don't know what to say, 1, 2, and 3, right? Who you are, what you do, what you're pursuing, give them a location in there. Or number 2 is what you're pursuing. And number 3 is asking about how they're handling online. Because what that does is it puts the ball in their court, and now they start opening up, right? And they tell you. And then at that point, you are identifying if that brand is a hard no. We're absolutely not interested in working with online sales. Maybe they're brick and mortar industry specific licensed physician. maybe they're yes, right? We will work with e-commerce, but it's, it's low hanging fruit, right? You can get it right off the bat. But then the companies that are in the middle, we always say the ones that are wishy-washy, that's where the money is, right? Because they're like, we're not interested in working with online sellers. Well, 90% of online sellers are not pursuing that. So if you can differentiate yourself, pursue it, and separate yourself from everybody else, you're gonna get locked in there, and they're not selling to Amazon sellers, so the competition is capped.
Yeah, and that initial outreach, I think that is a pretty standardized, I don't want to say template, but essentially it is. I think that where the experience and the brand knowledge comes in is, and the experience of having failed accounts and, having opportunities that were missed and learning from experiences. I think that comes in on the second and the third and the fourth call most of the time. And in some cases, once you are experienced enough, like I was saying earlier, I mean, you kind of know when to go for the throat on the first call, which does happen. Um, but for the most part, that first call, at least initial outreach, is pretty standard. And I think that if you do that 100 times, you're going to pretty much get the hang of it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's about putting the reps, like you said, do it 100 times. Do it week after week for 6 months, and you'll get good at it. You'll start. You won't get really good at it until you have, like you said, the experience. But you will start. Every call you learn from, right? To this day, I learn from my calls, right? We all do. And just, I do want to just mention here, if anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat. We are here to answer whatever questions you have about Brand Direct Wholesale. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, just, hit that like button. It really helps out the videos in the channel. YouTube boosts them up in the algorithm. So appreciate that like button. When we talk about this outreach process, what's after that, right? Now they've opened up, they've started sharing information with you. Maybe you've gotten them now you got them on for 5 minutes, right? So you've made some progress here. What are you saying to them, right? What is the value props? What are some things that you're telling them to keep them on the phone?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the more that, just in general, on outreach after the first call, the more that you can observe and learn and allow them to talk, the better position you're going to be in to solve their issues. And so the more information you can find out about what their pain points are, it puts you in a better position. So first thing, I mean, for me, it's asking as many questions as I possibly can, or just allowing them to talk as much as possible. I had a call today where we hadn't talked in a couple of weeks. It was the second contact. It was a high level account. And the first thing that I said, even though I already knew all the issues, the first thing I said was, let's reiterate. I want you to re-explain. I want you to, talk through what your problems are, what the pain points are with Amazon. And in doing that, I pulled out a couple things that I didn't previously know. So anything on your, second, third, fourth call, I think get as much information out of them as possible, but also go in prepared and go in with the things that objectively based on your experience on Amazon are issues. So you can go into something, before every meeting that I have. If it is more of a higher level thing, I will take 15 minutes. I mean, it really only takes at this point, probably less. When you're a beginner, it might take longer, but I take a couple minutes and I go through the brand presence online. I have all my talking points and I'm ready to go with any solutions to pain points that they might have. But it's just about uncovering those pain points as you go, and then picking up on having a good perception and like emotional intelligence with it, where you can read them. And then if something really strikes a nerve, just continue to hit on it and use it to keep them on the phone and keep the conversation going. That was a lot. I feel like that was really long-winded, but hopefully there was one point in there that made sense.
Yeah, no, if people are listening, it made sense. Identifying the pain points and gathering information. A lot of the call is gathering information, right? Especially if you're a beginner and you don't, right? Because if you've been doing this for years, you have a pretty good idea going into the call about what they're going to say, right? You can look at the Amazon listing and be like, all right, this, there's this, or the Keepa chart, right? They got like 30 sellers and it just skyrocketed, or their prices all over the place, so you could kind of get an idea about what their challenges are. But when you're a beginner, you don't have all the rep underneath your belt yet. So it's very important to gather that information so that you're well equipped at not just that call, but subsequent calls thereafter. So when we talk about providing value, right, there are a few main value props that we offer brands that are generally blanket for a lot of brands, right? Meaning most brands that you reach out to are going to find this information valuable. So the first thing is making a commitment with an order, right? I think that's very often overlooked, right? We've even said to each other, hey, we're working on this account, right? We've been working on this account for 3-4 months. Let's just make a purchase to show the commitment to the brand, even if it's not really that profitable just yet, or even if it's not profitable at all, right? We've done that where it's not profitable at all, and we're just showing a commitment because for whatever reason, most business owners, if that's who you're talking to, or most high-level, strategic decision makers at these companies, see transactions as a click. All right, it's like now we're working together, right? So you could provide value all day long, but until that transaction goes through, you're not a customer of theirs, right? You're just a guy giving them information. So getting on their books with that transaction is very important, I think. Did you have anything to add to that?
It adds a little bit more legitimacy. We've been in high level conversations where companies want to, see financials, and they want to, it's like a step below that, where they're just looking for you to prove that you are a legitimate business. Because if you're just blowing smoke out your ass, essentially, like you have nothing at that point to back it up. And it's just another form of taking action. Just like companies, which we hear all the time, sellers will say that they're going to optimize the listing. They'll say that they're going to do these things. And then you talk with the company and they say, yeah, they never did anything. And so it's essentially that. It's like the equivalent. So you have to add action behind your words. And sometimes there's no other way to do that than having a transaction take place. And it just makes sense,
Right. And it's so interesting because like we walk like such a fine line in with brand direct. It's like transaction, yes, but you don't want to go overboard with it, right? Because I've seen sellers, reaching out to these brands, their only answer is to give them money, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have literally no other value propositions, no real vested interest or people skills or social, intelligence, because it's a lot of emotional intelligence, brand direct, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're building relationships and you're identifying where your prospect has issues. And if you can understand where your prospective partner has issues, you can then introduce viable solutions to those problems. So we got some questions rolling in here, which I do want to answer. But just going off of that, I touched on earlier about that account that we lost. This was probably net profit an $800,000 per year account. And I've literally talked with the brand owner after they went exclusive with another company, and he's told me it could have been you, right? So this is like, the ex-girlfriend that just like completely broke your heart.
My heart's hurting hearing this.
But it's like, it's all relationships at the end of the day. But my problem with that account was that I was a day late and $1 short. If we were in the position we are now 3 years ago, and we were able to identify that they were making a switch, because I'll tell you exactly the situation of what happened, which was 30 resellers on the listing, map violations, sellers weren't getting the buy box, so even more so map violations, right? Nothing was optimized. Brand names were mismatching. one image, packaging didn't match, their listings were terrible. But what they did was, like most brands, is they started making a switch, right? And there's a certain point where a brand's like, all right, we got to get this under control. And if you could hit it at that time, right? If your timing can align with when that brand is getting it under control, you could strike gold, my friend. Like how many times have we struck gold with just from timing?
I mean, it's the brand that we met at the event we just went to and just talked to them today. I was telling you I had a call with them, and they do $6 million a year on Amazon. And we took some action on the first call today. It's like, not because we're special and amazing and great sellers, but it's because the timing is right for them. And so that's big. Sometimes it's just, we've said this many times, we call months apart, 6 months apart, we call the same brand. And, previously they ignored me, and you get us the account. So, it just depends on timing sometimes.
It's timing. Yeah. And with that, the ability, I think, to have the emotional intelligence to identify when go, like
Yeah.
literally go, because this, based on the tonality, based on the listings, based on a number of different factors, and that's that intuitive sense that we talk about. But it's intuition, but it's also data that we're able to aggregate into 5 seconds, right? And that's really defines what the intuitive sense is, because at the end of the day, it's a million different data points that we're looking at, screaming at us, pursue this brand. Yep. In 5 seconds, because we have the experience, right? Whereas the beginner seller, it might take a little bit longer to identify, okay, here's their problem here, here's their problem there.
Yeah. Fishing is the perfect analogy. It's like, literally, you need to know when to let the line out, and you need to know when to crank it as fast as you can. Because sometimes there's a brand that, we've been working with for well over a year, and we're just starting to move things along. And then there's also brands that we work with for a month, and we are literally trying to move as fast as humanly possible to push everything through to get into either an agreement or to move the next step forward, because it is time for that brand and they're ready, and you need to capitalize on how they're reacting to you. Strike while the iron's hot, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Why don't we address some of these questions here? I mean, the first one has to do with living outside of the U.S., not being domestic. And is it important to, where the company address and region is registered on Amazon?
Well, I'm just going to read the question again. Yeah, I mean, people operate overseas Amazon businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can absolutely succeed at doing that, but you might have to jump through a couple more hoops than the guy living in the US. So you do want to have some sort of US presence. I mean, you have to, because we're buying physical inventory, right? So you got to be shipping your inventory somewhere, whether it's a prep center, whatever that is. With brand direct outreach, I think it's important to build the relationship on the phone.
Yeah.
So you have to have some way of communication via phone, right? If you're only contacting by email, we use email all the time, but you're not going to be able to necessarily compete to the degree that somebody who is doing, just cold calls 100 to 150 per week. I mean, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, it's a different level of intimacy. I mean, you'll get accounts, but it'll be different. It'll be harder to close the high ticket accounts. It'll be harder to get anything, on a level where you need 10, 15, 20 calls to close that high ticket account, because that happens, and so if you cut yourself off at that point by only sending emails, I think that it's going to be significantly more difficult to close high ticket accounts.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as you can absolutely operate, just finding a way to legitimize, the address and prepping products at a prep center or something like that. Just make sure all your information matches on Amazon. That's important. So, next question just is, how do you regulate and enforce MAP for a brand? I think there's a lot of different options for that. I'll talk on that one.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to recognize, so that John, who's asking that question, and anybody else who's wondering, is that Amazon does not enforce MAP pricing. We need to identify and explain to the brand that MAP is an agreement between the distributor, the reseller, and the brand, right, the manufacturer. It's an agreement. It's a handwritten agreement, or not handwritten. It's a hand-signed. It's a signature agreement that both parties are signing. Amazon's not going to do anything to enforce it because they're a free marketplace, and they don't want to be looked at as, price manipulators, right? So you need to explain these things to the brand if they're like, we're trying to control our pricing on Amazon, because at the end of the day, it's not going to happen unless you implement strategic measures. And strategic measure number one is getting your distribution under control. So they need to identify who they're selling to and how those resellers are getting on Amazon with the help of you. And you can do that because chances are they're not scouring Amazon like you are. And you can look at all of the resellers on Amazon, public information, business names, addresses, and you can match that up with what the brand is buying from. So if the brand has a distribution problem, or rather, if the brand has a pricing problem, it's likely a distribution problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. It's more of a question of distribution, because if you have the right distributors, or if you're the only distributor, there's not going to be any MAP issues. I also would love to get what did you say? A handwritten, like
a John
notarized MAP agreement by like a carrier pigeon. That's
the only way pricing is going to be under control. No, but it's a written agreement between the distributor and you, right? It's not something. No, it's not Amazon. Right. Now, there are other ways to use Amazon programs. I'm laughing because I know exactly what you're thinking. There are other ways to use Amazon programs that will help implement the control of the price, such as brand registry, issuing IP claims, 2D transparency. However, in principle, those are not supposed to be used to control the price. I would say the first line of defense should be the distribution. Cleaning up who is selling on Amazon, and then when there's less sellers, right? It's supply and demand. If there's less sellers on a listing, the price is going to go up because the competition is going down. So with that, help articulate that to the brand, and then use brand registry as a mechanism of further control. And then you could even use a 2D transparency, which I don't know if you want to do just a sentence explanation on what 2D transparency is. Those are the ways to control the pricing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way to control counterfeits, but realistically, it's used to control distribution a lot of the times. It's the short and sweet version. Also, just in regards to the question, Mohammed right here, with the virtual address, I would definitely say that brands do have somewhat of a negative connotation towards something like that. But I mean, it's hard when you're in that sort of situation. I mean, if anything, sending straight to a prep center, using that as your address when you reach out to the brand, saying that is your address, you might be able to do that even if your Amazon account is registered under a different address, to provide legitimacy. I don't know if that's good advice. You think you should include your prep center to brands reaching out?
I mean, I don't see why not, as long as you've cleared it with the prep center. Yeah. I would imagine, and if you are in that position where you're operating overseas business, you may want to consider also targeting distributors too, because you're not going to have that extremely high high barrier to entry, right? You got to keep in mind that, like we have a warehouse, we have, an office, we have physical presence. We've flown out to different regions of the country to meet with brands and develop relationships with these brand owners. So, and we're still fighting an extremely uphill battle, right?
Well, we still can't close any accounts.
If you take away all of those factors, right?
Yeah.
Because you're operating overseas, you're not doing any of that likely. I would also incorporate distributors into the outreach process. I mean, these are the things that not everybody's going to say, but we always try to be authentic with people, right? And tell them, what's required of brand direct wholesale. And at the end of the day, it's a relationships business.
Yeah, and it's not that you can't develop good relationships
right
being overseas. It's just the fact of you have certain things that are taken off the table because of your logistically with your location. So, can it be done? Yeah, but challenging yourself with other things like distributors is still a very profitable business model, but it might just work better logistically for your setup.
And it doesn't mean you can't do brand direct, incorporate some brand direct, incorporate some distributors, because that might help you scale faster.
Right.
So if anybody else has any questions here, let's, throw them down in the chat. We are here to answer all questions, related to Amazon. It doesn't have to be Amazon wholesale. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, hit the like button. So we walked through value props. We walked through all of that. And another thing I just want to mention on giving the value props and having the phone conversation, and this is something that comes with experience and repetition, but I always say, you need to it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. I mean,
conviction is huge.
You have to be convicting, know what you're talking about, and passionate. Because if you're talking to a business owner in particular, you are talking to another entrepreneur who started a company. And if you are hyped up about their brand, right, they're getting hyped up too.
Yeah.
I mean, how many accounts? Well, I mean, we've closed a couple real high ticket accounts, but how many accounts have we closed just because they're like, hoorah, let's go.
Yeah. And I feel like, part of it is making known that you're on the same team essentially, but I feel like I have like a baseline. I feel like, and I'm kind of always there. And if I need to, I go here. I feel like you're either like 0 to 100. You're like calmly talking, and the next second you're like screaming like passionately at the brand owner, which, it's you have a good gauge on when that's necessary. But I think certain times, just like anything else, conviction, obviously we're always passionate about what we're doing, but sometimes you need to know when to use conviction kind of as a tool as well, because it is a skill set. It really is.
Right. Yeah, no, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. We got a question in here from D Cardair. How do you approach brands at trade shows? What's your process before attending and actually seeing the brand in person? Let's answer that one first before his next question.
Yeah. So assuming that it's a brand that we've never, reached out to before or had in contact with, if it's a brand that we've already contacted, then we're usually going with the intentions of meeting up with them. But we're always trying to scout the list of vendors that are at the trade show first. We want to, sometimes we'll send it out to one of our virtual assistants, and we'll have them go through the list and, see if there's any profitable products or any good selling products. I shouldn't say profitable because we don't have a price list yet. But we'll go through that, and we'll see if they have an Amazon presence. Are they selling 1PL? Are they, are they in a bad position? Are there value adds, et cetera? And then generally speaking, we will go up to the brands, and the thing that we won't say is that, hey, we want to sell your products on Amazon. And we've seen one too many sellers do that and fail miserably. And we've come up quite literally right behind them, and we've gotten in really in-depth conversations with the brand owners. So we approach it the same way we'd approach a phone conversation. There's really no difference except the fact that you're in person, and you can now tell facial expressions and tonality even better. And you can just kind of approach it and ask what their issues are, because you're probably going to get the same answer, which is that we're not accepting Amazon sellers. So if you can get really good on the phone, just translate that into real life, and it becomes, the same, probably easier, to be honest with you. The hard part is about getting them to remember you after the trade show, which you need to be sending constant follow-up emails.
Yeah. I mean, the work starts after the trade show, right? If you've made a connection with a brand at a show or at an event, like that was, step 0.001. You need to be following up with them.
And I even like to, I mean, I know like you always poke fun of me for this, but like I like to, if we're there the first day of the trade show and I meet that brand the first day, I'm going back up to them the next day and the next day after that and the next day after, even if it's just like, hey, what's up? Like, I got this coffee from such and such a place. Like just making that connection so that they put the face to the name and the organization, and they just recognize you, and it makes it a little bit easier for their brain to connect to you after the trade show when they've seen 100 people, but you're the only guy that they saw 5 times. So
Yep, exactly. It's I poke fun at you at it, but it's true. I mean, you need to be staying current in the brand's mind, and the only way to do that is by continuing to follow up with them, whether it's in person or online. The next question is, what are your thoughts on these brand protection agencies that will send up, I think he means IP complaints on behalf of the brand?
I think you could be doing that if you have brand registry, but you also shouldn't need to be doing that if you have the distribution under control. So I don't know. I honestly, I mean, I really don't have too many thoughts on that, because I think that if anything, in a lot of cases, it's a waste of money for the brand, because it can be controlled internally and they don't even know that. They're just looking at like, oh, this is an easy solution that might work, and they're just throwing money at it. So honestly, I mean, you can add that as a value prop to be like, hey, we're saving you money just by going with us, because we're going to, take care of the IP complaints if we need to issue them for you. But I don't know. I'm not down with that. That's just me.
Right. Yeah. And the next one, do brands want your sales history and your Amazon seller account, a new Amazon seller account? I understand that question, and it's very valid. But at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. And there was a day and a point in time when we had 0 products in our inventory, and we were doing cold outreach. So if there's a will, there's a way. You're going to, if that is your goal, to close accounts with brands, you will find a way of doing it. You will work your way around the fact that you don't have any products in your inventory in a brand new Amazon selling account. If you have to sell yourself, what do they call it? It's like,
Make it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, right? It's like, if you have to fake it till you make it, that's what you do. I mean, the story about the 8-figure Amazon seller, right? Somebody that we look up to very much so. What was it about?
There was no buyer. There was no team.
Right. We were talking to an 8-figure. We were talking to an 8-figure Amazon seller, and they were like, when they were first starting, they were telling these brands, right? We're going to reach out to our buyers. We're going to send this over to our team. But at the end of the day, at that time, there was no buyers. There was no team. There was, just the 2 guys running the company. So it's like, you'll find a way.
You're also not going to close, an 8-figure account as a new seller. Like, it's just not going to happen. You don't have the money, first of all, and you don't and the skill set's not there. And then the brand, the higher the level of the account, the more the brand is going to interrogate you, essentially, because just like you would do with them, you're taking a larger risk when you are investing all of this money in these products. Even if it's a safe bet, statistically speaking, but it's still a larger risk because there's a larger amount of money involved. you put more effort into buying a car than you do buying coffee. And there's a reason for that. So the brand is going to be a lot more meticulous with you as well. And so you're not going to close the account if it's a 6-figure profit and the brand sees that there are no items in your store and you have no feedback and you barely know what you're doing. It's just not going to happen. So you're going to get accounts that are more in your wheelhouse as you grow. And that's the great thing about growing organically, because you're going to make mistakes with beginner money and not make mistakes with, hundreds of thousands of dollars, essentially.
Exactly. And that's why, you can throw all the money in the world at wholesale, right? If your ladder's not on the right wall and you're not, moving in the right direction, you're just going to be running an unprofitable business. And there's thousands of unprofitable Amazon businesses out there, right? Bleeding cash every single day, not making any money. People look at how they're selling these products for, pennies on the dollar and making money. Well, here's the answer, is that they're not, right? They are not making any money at all. And that's just, cold reality. Is if you're running a profitable business on Amazon, it's very much so a slow process in order to build, especially if you're starting with not so much capital. So we got another comment here about what I'm saying. So thank you for that one. And then we got, do brand need a paid professional seller account
Spit it out
to get brand registry?
Yeah. I mean, your seller account, the brand, hopefully I'm interpreting this correctly, but I'm assuming that you are not the owner of the brand, which in that case, the brand who has the seller account would put it in their name. And I'm pretty sure they don't have to be a professional seller. I don't think that's related to anything other than the fee on the products that you sell per month, correct?
Yeah, no. So brand registry is a separate portal than Amazon Seller Central. So the brand does not need an Amazon seller account to create a brand registry account. One is not dependent on the other. However, the end goal of getting brand registry, I would presume in John's situation would be to get control over the listings, to make improvements to the listings and start building out their brand presence. Well, in order to do that, all of those changes need to be running through a Amazon seller account. That can be your Amazon seller account. It could be the brand's, depending on how you and the brand decide to handle it. But regardless, in order to do any of that, it does not happen in brand registry. It happens in Amazon Seller Central. So think of brand registry as the key to opening the door to getting control over Amazon, making the improvements, right? And when we're making changes to listings, right, making image changes, A+ content, bullet points, all the different components of the listing, Amazon's not just going to take anybody's changes, right? Because they don't want everybody and anybody making changes to the listing for good reasons. So they structure this, and I think I might have been talking about this last time a little bit, which is they structure who they're going to allow to make changes to the listing basically as a hierarchy, right? And it's based around this contribution score. So I could be winning the contribution on the bullet points. You could be winning the contribution on the images. That being said, if we're all resellers on selling the product, we are all on the same level. But if I now get brand registry with the brand and they appoint me as the administrator and the registered agent of the brand, my contribution score in Amazon's eyes has moved from like a 20, mid-20s to 150. And it's essentially unlocking the ability to make changes to the listing. So now you control the listings on behalf of the brand, and Amazon's going to accept your changes over any of these other sellers. So we always like to get brand registry when we can, because it's our foot in the door and it's a first step at making a stab at an exclusive agreement down the road, because it puts your foot in the door and it allows you to basically be the brand representative, right? Because that's literally what they're doing with brand registries. They're checking a box with you as the brand representative, and you don't want to let it go to other sellers.
The way I was interpreting that question was, in order to link your Seller Central account to a brand registry, does it have to be a professional seller account? I don't think it has any impact.
In order to link your account to a brand registry. In order to link your account to a brand registry. I'm not exactly sure what we mean by link the account.
Like have a if they send an invite to your Seller Central account to be a part of the brand registry.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't think it made any difference. I never really thought about that before. First of all, I mean, just addressing that, you should be a professional seller account unless you're like your first month. And I think even at that point, I mean, what is it, 40 units?
Yeah, but I think he's asking if the brand needs to pay $40 a month for a professional Amazon selling account to get brand registry. And
no. Obviously, we just don't understand this question. But yeah, no, you don't have to. Maybe I shouldn't say me. Maybe I should say I. But yeah, no, it doesn't. It's like Brad said, it's a means to an end, totally separate entity.
But these questions open up doors. Like there's so many layers to these different things that I love these questions because they open up cans of worms all over the place, right? You know, you might get nuggets and gems from some other things that we said that, you know, might have been a result of just this one question, right? Because there's so many layers to this process. You know, one question is, you know, there's multiple answers to one question, right? And so the next question here is, are you guys using Jungle Scout AI to improve listings like bullet points, description, and back-end keywords? So I know you're a big fan of AI. So you speak on that.
I called Brad about 10 minutes before we got on this call, and I said, hey, I'm just wrapping up some AI listing optimization stuff. So I was literally doing it right before this call, and we use Smart Scout for that. And then I've also have some other resources like things from Helium 10, things of that nature, where we are using the combination of keywords to combine into listings. And we're also using competitor keywords, things like that, in addition to, obviously all the pictures and things. But yeah, generic keywords, title, bullets, description, all that. It's hard to beat with AI when you have the data. And it is a great tool. Sometimes I will just bring up the listing totally. I mean, it takes 2 seconds. Obviously, you can change things down the line, but it takes 2 seconds to generate with Smart Scout. And you can just show that in a screen share to a brand and say, hey, we've optimized your listing. We've taken care of all the keywords and the bullets for SEO and stuff like that. And it's a great value prop as well. Also, if you guys are interested in using Smart Scout, we do have an affiliate code for that. That'll get you a percentage off. So if you would like to, save some money on Smart Scout, which is a tool that we've recently implemented.
And it in the description for the video.
In a lot of ways. Exactly. It'll be in the description of the video. And if you'd like to use Smart Scout, then it's definitely helped us out. And we implemented it this year, and it's made a lot of changes to how we run the business. And also, yes, Smart Scout does give a brand score. So it's not a listing score. It's a score overall based on how the brand is in terms out of 10 and in terms of, keywords and pictures and every A+ content. It takes everything into account.
Yeah. So we're coming up here on an hour. And if anybody's got some last minute questions, throw them in. And if you guys have any questions afterwards, we always go through the questions and comments on the YouTube channel. So, drop those down on the video. It will be reposted to YouTube. And I mean, last minute thoughts on Brand Direct. I know we didn't.
I was going to say
store thing. But it was all outreach, which I think was really valuable because that's where most people's questions are.
For sure. I mean, I think we're doing this. We do this live every week, every Wednesday, and so we've done plenty of sourcing on Smart Scout. If you were looking forward to that, and then you didn't, we're not going to have time to do that this week, but you can go and watch the videos back on the YouTube channel that have Smart Scout sourcing and kind of how we find profitable products. But other than that, I mean, make your calls. There's no There's no substitute. If you took anything away from this or any conversation that we have, is make your phone calls. That's pretty much it.
The reps. That's it, right?
That's it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Hit the like button, and we will see you next time.